No gold is not enough.
Hello, everybody. Finally, we are able to do this. I was trying to talk to Diane Chadwick-Jones. By the way, this name is so nice. I wanted to have a fancy name like this. Chadwick-Jones sounds like more, sounds like an important and rich person. So my name is much more humble, Diane. So can you please give a little bit about your background to the Brazilian audience? I know you have some Brazilian roots, so let my country mates know a little more about you.
Oh, thank you so much, Hugo. So I joined BP in about 1990, and I worked in the operations of BP for about 15 years. And then I went into the safety department and I was working on safety culture. And then this actually moved into the new view of safety and implementing the new view of safety. And then about 2 years ago, I retired. And now what I do is I do mentoring and I do advocacy and conferences and just keeping the momentum on this conversation moving forward. And I do work for companies in this area as well. And my mother is from Rio, and I lived in Rio for 4 years, from 2000 to 2004. And I actually, both my children were born in Brazil, and they are cariocas. So, but I'm not really great at speaking Brazilian Portuguese because my mother's from a Spanish background, and so she brought me up speaking Spanish, not speaking Brazilian Portuguese. But funnily enough, it actually is, when she speaks it, I find that she speaks Brazilian Portuguese better than her Spanish.
Good to know. Really curiosity for you guys, and I didn't know this until we started the conversation with Gianni. So really interesting background, one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the most important companies in one really risky business, I would say. The oil and gas business is really tough to deal with. But of course, from my understanding, Diane, really safety one, at least in the past, a lot of compliance was demanded by staff. I know some backgrounds from the Brazilian companies in this area. Was it the same when you joined? You saw this transformation, or was it already something different?
Well, I joined BP well, I was with BP for 30 years. So I think we've seen an evolution
Oh, yeah.
in the oil industry, in the energy industry. What we would have seen would be first a compliance focus, and then moving into management systems, then moving into behavioral-based safety, then safety culture. And now those are the 4 ages of safety. And now we're thinking about the 5th age of safety, which is, we could call it resilience engineering, we could call it safety differently, we could call it safety 2. But why? Why did the oil industry and these companies move through these transitions? Well, we get to the point of safety culture, and we find that even then it's not enough. And why is it not enough? Because what we're doing is we're not looking at the difficulties and the realities of work. Okay, behavioral-based safety, that's about finding issues, but it's too superficial. It can work with, for example, PPE, wearing your boots, but and of course having a management system is absolutely essential. Having work on safety culture is absolutely essential, but it's just not enough. And so what was being seen in the oil industry was a huge amount of effort being put into safety, but yet it felt that there was something missing. And so that is why this advance has happened, because we have to go to where the need is. The need is, if everything was working with these four ages of safety, then we wouldn't be wanting to try and advance.
Exactly. So there was a trigger point that you can tell to the people that are in this situation right now in a plateau or something that started the need for a change, for an evolution in the safety, or was it only based on studies? So what was the trigger for you to
Very much based on the plateau.
plateau?
Very much based on the plateau, because and I think there's the what I hear from leaders, and in fact somebody said this to me yesterday. Well, we're actually, relatively speaking, we don't have many incidents, but when they do happen, they're pretty bad. And what are we going to do to find out more about the reality of our workplace? So I would say that that maybe there are three things that are the trigger points. It's when something happens and you go to the site and you think, well, I can't see any leading indicators here, and so you think, well, we need to be better at looking for risk. Another thing is the plateau, when you think, oh, well, we cannot improve anymore. And the third one is about repeat incidents, where we've had an incident, we've investigated it, we've made the mitigations, and yet it happens again. And why is that? The reason is because quite often we focused on the people who were doing the work and are retraining them, rather than saying, well, actually, this work is quite difficult. There's an issue with the equipment, there's an issue with the resourcing, and maybe an issue with the training. We need to go a bit deeper. We need to look at what lies beneath. So those are the three things that can cause a company and the leaders in a company to reconsider what they're doing with safety and looking to move forward.
Yes, I was analyzing an incident some time ago, and we draw the conclusions that there was nothing to do. There was no action to take because it was inherent to the activity that was being developed. We talked to everybody, we called the operators, and they say, but yeah, the only way to avoid this risk is not doing the activity. There is no other way. And then the company accepted this as an answer. So I was thinking to myself, and I said, that's a really, really big evolution, because I never been in a situation where we can say to the company, there's nothing to do. It's inherent to the activity. Because usually what we do is training, retraining, revising procedures. So do you think we are in this path of accepting things in a different way and trying at least to avoid blaming people as the first and immediate action?
Well, I'm wondering, I mean, I've not been in a situation where an incident happened and I investigated it and it was felt that there was nothing that could be done. I've not been there. What I'd like to do is kind of give you an example. So, people carry suitcases, and these suitcases are quite heavy, and people could hurt their backs. Now, if we said that we were wanting to focus on people and train people to carry the suitcases better, or ask people to have less heavy suitcases. Now, we could do that, or we could put wheels on suitcases. And so that's where I'm sitting, where we're having people, for example, draining water from tanks but needing to do other tasks. And they go away, and unfortunately there may be a spill because the water comes out that has accumulated, but also the hydrocarbons come out as well. So then did a lot of analysis. We did a lot of analysis on this and thought, well, this is happening so often. What we should be doing is we should be making this automatic, because it's happening every day. And so rather than using up people's time and getting them to wait and to watch the oil-water interface, and sometimes even the sight glass to be able to see if where the oil-water interface, that it maybe it's scratched or cloudy. So maybe people would be saying it, let's do that then. Let's automate it and have a sensor with that. And so that's more where I'm sitting, in the place of it's not about replacing people or automating everything, but it's rather than coming from a place of fear in terms of that we can't fix this and we've got a big problem here, put all our heads together and try and think of different solutions.
Yes, totally agree. So, Diane, what was the characteristics or the signs that you can identify in a company where the new view is implemented? So, is there some key points or some milestones that we could say, oh, okay, I saw some sparks that the new view is being implemented, is in place in this organization? Because this is you are acting now as a mentor and as a consultant, and I wonder if what's the final product for a consultant in a new view implementation? Is there a final product?
Well, I think when you can see two things that are happening in the company.
I'm taking notes.
That okay.
People should take notes as
and
well.
I could say how to get there, okay? But let's talk about the two things that
Yeah.
that I see. When I see these two things, that I know the company is on its way, okay, on its way in a positive direction. The first thing is about how leaders respond when things don't go to plan, okay? And by the way, there's something that you need to be able to do that, but let me explain. So rather than the leader say, when something doesn't go to plan, and it doesn't even need to be an incident, okay? It could be anything that happens. So like a project delayed, for example, instead of saying who's accountable and who are we going to discipline for this, instead they go, okay, right, so our people must have been in a difficult situation, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, thank you for telling me, how can I support you? Now that is a huge sign in a company that this is moving in a good direction. But how do we get there? And that's the second thing. The second thing is the understanding of the reality that there is a gap between work as imagined, how we think things are happening, and work as done. And by showing leaders that reality, and we can do it through incident investigation, we can do it through site walkarounds. There are many ways of doing it, even just discussing in the office the difference between what we think is reality and what actually is reality. Then we can, that actually is the key to responding supportively to bad news. So in BP, the way that it was even communicated at the very beginning was thinking that you had gone to another country in a hire car, and that you were putting fuel into your car, and you may not be used to that, and you may put the wrong type of fuel in your hire car. And easily done, right? So you can see how the context drives the behavior. But the great thing is that in most countries, we have the different size nozzles, which means that you can't actually put the wrong type of fuel in your hire car, which is great. And so understanding how human performance is influenced by the context, and understanding that our brains have not changed in design for the past 40,000 years, but here we are using our iPhones. That is a way of of engaging senior leaders so that they can get their heads around this idea. Because generally speaking, there's a view that, of course, the procedures are perfect and the equipment is perfect and the weather is perfect and the people, oh, well, they're the weak link. And that, of course, we know is not true. In fact, everything is imperfect and the people are all the time doing good catches. They're the ones who are enabling the work to be successful rather than being the problem.
Exactly. I've been in situations where I had to defend operators for situations where they were doing what they did for the past 10 years, and suddenly something went wrong, and then people want to blame them because they were outside the procedure. So I said they never followed the procedure. The procedure is there only to penalty people, to blame people when something happens. That's the only. Nobody checked this procedure for the past 10 years. So this is something that I totally agree with you. How leader response can enable the process to speed up and to work, and it can kill everything as well. Because if in the first opportunity the leader respond badly, we are dead. Nothing happens. But let's say that I'm identified a plateau in my company, in my organization, and I want to do something about it. What would be the things that you think I should start for?
Okay, well, there's been research done on this, but it's a combination of three things. So you have to have a kind of a logical argument. I mean, they already have to want to do it. It's just, the old joke, how many psychologists does it get to change a light bulb? Well, it's just one psychologist, but the light bulb must want to change. Okay, so, but I was going back to the three things that combine. So obviously the leader, just to one side, the leader, the company must want to change. But so then you have the logical arguments of why this is. Secondly, and I will go into that. Secondly, you have to have data, and I'll go into that. I'll talk about that. And thirdly, you have to have validation. Okay, and validation, that means credibility. So for example, you say, this approach started in the 1940s with aviation and then into nuclear in the 1970s, into the oil industry in the kind of 2015s, around that, moved into pharmaceuticals, and let me show you and bring into my company people who are already doing this. Okay, so validation and credibility is very important. So let's go back to the kind of the logical argument and the data. So the logical argument is, well, so talking about workers, imagine work is done, going through incident investigations, very important. Okay, showing in more depth, going beyond procedure not followed. Okay, because we know many investigations just stop at procedure not followed and then say the person was the problem, but instead do a deeper analysis to show why the procedure was not followed. And then to say, and also to bring stories. And this is still within that category of logical argument. So for example, a very famous story published by Step Change for Safety in the UK North Sea is about a electrical junction box where electricians are working on it and causing power cuts for the whole of the facility to have a blackout. And this happened, and so they thought, well, the first electrician was careless. It happened again, thought, oh, not paying attention. Happened again, third electrician, not paying attention. And so when it happened a fourth time, then there was a deeper investigation to find that in fact 2 teams were working on that electrical junction box and changing the labeling. And that's the reason why the electricians were causing these blackouts, but it was because of a confusion to do with the labeling. And so telling these kind of stories, that fits in with the logical argument, because always what we're thinking as leaders is, what's in it for me? What's the value? What's the benefit? It's all about the leading with a very positive thought that we're going to learn more, that we're going to understand better our risk. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is there's a lot of data out there, but let me just give you two pieces of data which are quite useful. And both of these are from papers published by BP. So they're out there and I can provide them to your listenership. So the first one is a survey that shows that the higher the level of trust and speak up and listening there is at a site, the lower the number of incidents. Now, this actually is just a repeat of many studies that have been done since 2000. But it's a specific study and it actually shows that. And when we look in more detail, the reason why we found that to be was because in the places with the highest level of trust and speak up, it also had the highest level of understanding the reality of what was going on in the work, and therefore being able to fix issues before they became anything bigger. Okay, so that's the first piece of data. The second piece of data is about an adaptation of the just culture process in BP, where we updated it so that it didn't have those words like negligent or violation or reckless, and turned it into a series of questions that then was used after an incident investigation. And in the 350 cases of rule breaking in this sample of the study, which were over 18 months worth of data, what it was found was where these 350 cases looked like they were rule breaking. But then when we went into more detail, what we found was actually very few were rule breaking, and that anybody else in those circumstances would have done the same thing. And that's very important. And that using or talking about that kind of data is important. And it's not just BP. Okay, that same study has been published in a paper from aviation, from mining, another one from construction, another one from rail. So this is not anything new. But of course, our leaders, they're not going around reading academic papers, are they? So it's our role to bring this information to them in a totally adapted form so that they can see it. So in summary, logical reasoning, data, and validation stroke getting credibility are the three things to start in the journey when the leaders of a company already are questioning in what direction they'd like to go.
Yeah, that's something that now I understand why it's not easy to get to this point of being sponsored to implement, because cutting my own skin, the safety pro, usually safety professionals don't rely on validation, on data, on studies. They just take what's in the news, what's more, hyped, and try to implement, or even worse, they just do what's been done forever and thinks and expects different results. So great insights for those who want to do something different, rely on those 3 points that I consider key points.
Yeah, well, I think it's really hard being a safety professional because we have all this training, from IOSH and all the trainings that we have, and we have all the regulation. And so sometimes we feel as if it's all about compliance, and that it's reactive because it's to do with incident investigation. And this approach is actually much more proactive. Now, people find that a totally overwhelming thought. Okay, can you imagine the idea of trying to do learning teams starting from nowhere? People go, well, what is even a learning team? So it's very overwhelming. So my one piece of advice would be to look at a task, a safety critical task, and look and walk through it with the people who are doing it and ask them what's making the work difficult, what kind of issues have happened in the past, what would you say to somebody who's new to this piece of work, and build the trust on that. And that, what we see is that we actually see things from a very different perspective. So I think if you're talking about just where to start on proactive safety and on learning from everyday work, go to where the pain is, go to where there's been an issue with a safety critical task, or go to where there's been near misses on a safety critical task. Do not think of this as going around doing learning teams on lots of different things. Start really small and start at just one place, and start with a leadership team who are really questioning what they can do more to improve safety at their site.
Yes, I put a pilot project together to substitute, to change the inspections we had regularly, like checking behavior and other stuff, for this kind of more open doing together. We call it like doing together, where the safety pros followed an activity without too much interference, just watching and try to capture the difficulties and where people deviate from what was planned.
Yeah.
And then it created this kind of trust. It was not the main goal when we started. It was more like putting us available to help them with influence with the leadership to improve their conditions. But at the end, as a byproduct, we created trust between the team, safety team, and the operations people. And also, this is something really important. But something that I see, Diane, all the companies is struggling. There are 2 points, and I'd like you to comment. One is measuring safety. I don't see anybody doing this in a good way. I probably would do different if I had the chance, but usually leadership wanna see every time the same stuff. So it's tough to measure safety in a way that the new view suggests, if they suggest something. And second, always people ask about if it's not gonna to become an anarchy if we don't blame anybody else, if we don't do more, if we don't penalty people, if we don't discipline people. So could you comment those 2 points, please?
I'll go with the piece around accountability first. People are very worried about losing a tool in their toolkit and that they cannot do discipline. And of course, there are cases, and there are quite rare cases, when discipline makes sense. What the shift is about not jumping straight to discipline. The shift is about not on the day saying we're going to send that person home, but say, right, let's find out what made sense, what was the context, because and let's talk to the person. Because, for example, in some cases in the past, it would be a subcontractor or a contractor, and that person would already have been sent home, and then we would not find out what had happened. So it's very much about saying discipline remains in the toolkit, but let's be considered. Let's look at and deliberate and look at all the influencing factors within this situation, so we can understand why that was. And in fact, in the Just Culture paper, there were some cases of discipline that happened after the Just Culture, but it was very few. And either it was a coaching conversation or a first written warning, but a very few number. So discipline is not taken away. And that's the first thing. And the second question was around leading indicators. God knows I've tried. Okay, so, and I've tried many different things. And the one that works the best is the annual company survey. And what that is there's your standard survey has many questions. Questions about care, questions about trust, questions about speak up. Those are the ones that statistically link to, and have repeatedly over the past 20 years in different companies and different industries, statistically link to safety metrics. And so it's an interesting one because you do it by site and then you find out straight away what is the situation in your sites. And then you can actually work on trying to improve that level of trust by doing this kind of education, the education on the new view with the leadership team and supporting the leadership team, and you can see the improvement. So that would be the one that I would most use. I mean, there are other ones like, for example, post-job verifications of how easy was the procedure to use? Was it difficult to do because it was late at night? Those also do give you some indications of how difficult the work is to do. So that, and I don't know if many companies already have those in place, but I would say if you don't have anything in place, most companies do an annual survey. Just use your annual survey. That will give you the most reliable information. And it's also information that your people do not need to spend hours and hours gathering. This is information that flows through to you in your standard annual people attitude survey or people engagement survey.
Diane, that was the first time I hear about it. So everybody, every company, at least the biggest ones, they use the survey. We follow up the evolution or involution of the data, but I never linked this. So thank you personally for this hint because, I will use it because it's always tough. I used to say that measuring safety is the highest sin in the companies. The most difficulty, it kills everything you try to do because the indicators doesn't reflect what you are doing.
Yeah.
So thank you for this. So Diane, I have a interesting discussion with one of the students in the training I provide in the HOP here in Brazil. He was asking about reporting risks. So what was my thoughts on having a goal for risk assessment, like 2 risks a week or 3 risks a week per person? And I told him that, in my opinion, it didn't work because if you put the goal of 2, they will give you 2, 3, they will give you 3, 10, they will give you 10. And so he said, so how can I keep them motivated if I don't have a goal for them to report stuff? And I told him, solving the problems that they identify. Usually companies report like 3,000. They are proud about 3,000 risks reported or 4,000, but they don't have the ability to solve even 10%, so people are reporting, but they know that nothing's going to happen. They are only concerned about the number of reports. So give me your thoughts on this.
I have seen this. So I've seen this in, for example, it used to be in offshore facilities where in a month of being offshore that people would be expected to do 10 per month. And what would happen is that they would have 2 observations during the month and then 8 on the last day. And what this does is it actually does undermine the credibility of safety in the organization. But as you said, it also gives this a huge amount of information and data that is very difficult to do anything with. And so there is this, what is much more important is to find out what people are struggling with, and then to work together and fix it with them. And what I see is that that's actually the biggest generator of trust, or the biggest lever for trust, is actually listening to people, to their concerns, and addressing those concerns. Because why? Because then they tell you more, and they tell you more. So they might start off by telling you, as I have seen in one place, about concerns about an electrical socket near a sink in a kitchen. Okay. And then the team just waited to see what would happen. Was this going to be fixed or not? Yes, it was. Okay, right. Okay, now that means it's okay. That means we can actually say something else. We can ask about, we'll talk about another issue. And then it moves into the kind of things that they may have been punished for in the past, like missing a step in a procedure because there's actually a problem with the equipment. But in the past, they just try to get the job done and move forward. And now the trust has been built because they know that they'll be listened to, that they know they'll be thanked for talking about the issue. And they also know that this issue will be resolved. So it's how to help trust happen is a combination of the care, the listening, and the fixing.
Perfectly explains. So have you been in a situation where you give a training on the new view or something, HOP or safety tool, and after the training, and you know that the company is far away from those concepts, and at the end, the leadership says, we are already doing this here.
Oh, definitely. I have heard from companies about how they are such caring companies and how there is no blame in their company. And what I find is that if I'm speaking with quite senior leaders, they truly believe this. They truly believe this, and I'm going, oh, so how does it work when you're responding when things don't go to plan? And they're going, oh okay, because they remember that they are actually asking for accountability. And as soon as you ask for accountability, then you're setting in train a whole set of actions that are about finding out who's to blame. So what I find with these kind of situations is getting leaders more on a one-to-one basis, and to talking with them about how the reality is for them. But I do have companies that I work with that they just also feel a little ashamed about the level of blame. And I think how I take this is that it's just kind of normal, because when something doesn't go to plan, the most visible issue is the person on the day. And so we do naturally jump to blame rather than thinking about all the issues that came before, and that person was just the very last the last piece of the system to be involved, the last system component to be involved. So that's why I tend to be I say supportive to leaders when they say this to me, because I think, well, if you spent all these years being conditioned, and also by looking at issues in quite a simple kind of simplified way. And so I agree with you. It's a tough one, because our senior leaders in all companies, they do deeply care.
Yeah,
they do deeply care, and they really do want to improve safety. And so it's quite a huge shift for them to understand that they are actually the most important influence on safety in their company by the priorities they set, by the resources that they provide, by the way that they respond to bad news. And when leaders do understand this, it can be a big shock for them, because often they think that they are the victims of the actions of the workforce, rather than that the workforce are doing the best they can under the circumstances that the leaders have provided, and that the workers have almost no power to improve the amount of resourcing or the condition of the equipment or the priorities in their workplace. So that's a huge shift, and a very uncomfortable one as well.
Yes, I had to explain for some leaders in some consultancies or helping that the hurt person is the employee, because they were dealing with how the company was hurt and the employee was the causer. But it was the opposite, the employee was hurt, the employee was in the hospital. So the company is not hurt. Of course, you can talk about image, but physically, there is only one victim, and that's the employee, So, and another thing that our final question, fortunately, our time is running so fast. All good conversations end up like this. But I was in a previous opportunity, in a previous job, I was asked by the boss, I want to know everything in real time when it's related to safety. And I said, oh, okay, that's good sign. The person is really concerned, as you mentioned. He really care about everything. But and then I started reporting stuff to him, and he always had a solution. Like, do this, let's do that, let's do this. And so I called him and said, I will stop telling you things. He said, why? I said, because you have a solution for problems that doesn't exist, never existed, only in retrospective. You have solutions, and you put it in a way that the person that took the decision beforehand is stupid. So if you wanna still if you wanna still know things from me, take a breath. Try to understand what happened, and try to support and be supportive to the victim or to the situation. And then after this, we can think about a solution. But let's understand first. And he was really, really understandable in this point, and he changed. And afterwards, he called me and said, "You taught me something. You really taught me something. I was doing something wrongly, badly, not contributing for the improvement of the company, and you changed my mind." So I said, "Oh, thank you." And he thanked me for this. So this is something that you see usually in companies, people jumping straight to conclusions, or trying to be support you, or try to show that they care, but not contributing for the good of the organization.
I think there's been a lot of conditioning of managers and supervisors that they should have the solution. And of course, we know that the best solutions come from a collaborative conversation, especially with the people who are closest to the work. And I think it's great that you explained this to the leader. And I would imagine that he was grateful to you, not only because you explained to him that it was not helpful, but also because it actually took away a bit of the pressure of leadership. Because there's this huge pressure of thinking, I have to have all the answers. So yes, I've seen this a lot. And in fact, I was involved in writing a video training on this, which you can include in your podcast, which is about a leader going to see a worker who is having problems with a valve. And it shows about the kind of questions that the leader should ask, how the leader is feeling inside, how the workers are feeling inside. So asking open questions, doing active listening, and then opening up a conversation about what kind of options there are for the solutions, rather than just having the solution straight away. So let me include that in this package so that people can see it. And of course, it's free. It's from the Energy Institute in the UK. I think it actually may be also translated into Portuguese, or it'll have Portuguese subtitles.
Oh, that's already something. If not, we can provide it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I think it's really useful. So, Diane, where people can find you? So, if you want to tell a little bit about what you are doing now, what kind of service you can provide, where people can find you to talk or to contract you or something like this, please feel free. I call the marketing time.
Yeah. Well, so I'm mostly doing communications and advocacy. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share research papers because, of course, so much information is trapped within organizations. And so that's the reason why BP published these papers on purpose, to share with people, so that it could be part of the credibility and part of the data for actually helping other companies to move forward. So I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to speak with people if they're interested in asking me questions.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.